Friends, we're in the third week of a series called Children Go Where I Send You. And this is a series that's been inspired by John chapter 20, where Jesus appears to the disciples on the first night after his resurrection and tells them, "As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." So if you weren't here in weeks 1 and 2, Pastor Joe preached about how Jesus commissioned his disciples, changing their mission from one of learning to one of being sent. So I like to think of this as a little change on their business card. They were disciples, they are now apostles, they're ones being sent. But sent to do what? So far we have learned how they, and consequently we, are sent to live and to die. Now this week, I'm going to focus on how we are sent to serve. I don't have the strongest memory of my childhood, but little snippets of it survive. And there's this one fleeting image I have of riding in the back of our orange 1970s model Toyota Corolla when I was obviously a kid. I can still picture that car, 2 doors, black vinyl seats that fried your skin in the heat, this orange paint job that was all the rage in this time of shag carpets, right? Betraying my age here. Now, I don't know where we were going on this particular day, maybe to my grandmother's home in Ocoee. My dad had roots in that area and Winter Garden, so it was somewhere out there. But I do remember hearing my favorite song on the radio, "I Can Help" by a fellow named Billy Swan. Raise your hand if you know that song. I'll be very impressed. Oh, quite a few of you. Okay, well done. All right, so some of you remember. But if you don't know the song, the first verse goes like this. "If you've got a problem, I don't care what it is. If you need a hand, I can assure you this, I can help. I've got 2 strong arms, I can help. It would sure do me good to do you good. Let me help." Yeah, you know that one now? Okay, very good. It was a simple song with a jangly guitar sound from the 50s that was jazzed up with this undercurrent of organ. It's still one of my all-time favorite songs, though it's no lyrical masterpiece. In fact, later verses in the song reveals that the singer is just trying to get the girl, like so many other songs, right? Starts out noble, but really it's just about getting the girl. But this singer sincerely wants to help, and I think he's doing it because it would make him feel good. And that's the appeal of the song, I think, a simple offer of help with or without that romantic undercurrent. Now, as you all probably know, Ellen and I were on vacation in Alaska for a few weeks, and it was as wildly beautiful as all the folks say. My brother-in-law, who was part of our family contingent for this trip, put it best when he said that wherever you look, it's like you're looking at a puzzle being ready to be put together, right? You go to the store, you look for a puzzle at some gorgeous landscape scene. That's what Alaska's like. There's a puzzle. There's a puzzle. There's a puzzle. And while that stunning landscape was the star of the show, I was also struck by the number of seasonal workers who are drawn to Alaska from all over the country, and indeed from parts of the world, to serve the ever-growing tourism need in the summer. These seasonal service workers reminded me of Central Florida's own hospitality sector. We're not seasonally driven here like Alaska is. People are much more willing to spend their money to sweat than they are to freeze, after all. Somehow we've conned them into that. So we have a steady supply of full and part-time workers, not just seasonal ones. I have many friends and family members who are, even today, part of that vital service industry. And when you work full-time in tourism, as I once did, even if for a season, it can be tough to maintain that helpful disposition that we're supposed to have. It can become just another job. I knew it was time for me to move on when it started to feel like just another job. And knowing this, I especially appreciated the enthusiasm of the average Alaska service worker. In several places we visited, I heard that tourism has now eclipsed fishing as the second largest economic driver. I know a couple that used to run a food truck around here and who now work seasonally in Skagway, where we had dinner with them. George drives a tour bus, and Nicole works in a store that sells found ivory objects, from walrus and that sort of thing. George and Nicole are unusual in that they are older than most of the seasonal workers up there, who tend to be young adults. They do everything, the young adults this is, from narrating whale-watching tours to cooking and even bus driving. Imagine a bus load of old people. We were relatively young compared to most folks, right? Way, way younger, I'm hearing. Okay, way younger. Trying to be nice. Imagine this bus load of seasoned, mature folks, and there's this whippersnapper driving the bus, right? Even I was like, oh, I don't know about this, this is a little sketchy. But these people are everywhere, and they are friendly, and they're helpful, and they're eager to share the Alaska knowledge with us, such as the 5 types of salmon. We learned the 5 types of salmon. If you've been to Alaska, maybe you've heard this spiel before. If not, I'm going to go through it with you. Chum rhymes with thumb. With me so far? Chum. Okay. This is the finger that you use to poke your little brother's eye, right? So eye, think of eye, sockeye. All right, chum, sockeye. I'm going to hold up all 3 fingers now. That was close, wasn't it? Your biggest finger, it's not a bird salmon, Terry. This is the king salmon right here. All right, so let's see. This is hard to do now. So this one is the one that is your wedding band, your ring finger. Silver salmon here. And last but not least is the pink salmon. So chum, sockeye, king, silver, pink. I can go home now. I know all about Alaska. And now you do too. Well, our tour guide, we did 2 weeks there. We did a land portion and a cruise portion. Ellen and I preferred the land portion because we're just not cruise people. And our tour guide for the land portion was a fellow named Mike. And he is probably something of an elder statesman among these tour guides, since he's been a guide for about 8 years up there, and he looked to be about 35. Elder statesman, 35. But his service was particularly amazing. He expertly coordinated and adjusted our travels as circumstances changed. He had our hotel keys ready for when we got off the bus. He even had Ron, our bus driver, make an extra loop around downtown Anchorage so he could suggest oodles of places to eat after our museum visit that day. He even read some Northwest poetry to us, fittingly by a poet named Robert Service. What are the chances of that? But Robert Service is big up in that part of the world, and I'm going to read a little bit of one of his poems now called The 3 Voices. Ready? Here we go. The waves have a story to tell me as I lie on the lonely beach. Chanting aloft in the pine tops, the wind has a lesson to teach. But the stars sing an anthem of glory I cannot put into speech. The waves tell of ocean spaces, of hearts that are wild and brave, of populous city places, of desolate shores they lave, of men who sally in quest of gold to sink in an ocean grave. The wind is a mighty roamer. He bids me keep me free, clean from the taint of the gold lust, hardy and pure as he. Cling with my love to nature as a child to the mother knee. But the stars throng out in their glory, and they sing of the God in man. They sing of the mighty master, of the loom his fingers span, where a star or a soul is a part of the whole and weft in the wondrous plan. Here by the campfire's flicker, deep in my blanket curled, I long for the peace of the pine gloom when the scroll of the Lord is unfurled, and the wind and the wave are silent, and world is singing to world. Delightful, isn't it? Not all the poems in here are quite that delightful. I'll just give you a warning here, but some are a little bit even bawdy because Robert Service came around the beginning of the 20th century during the gold rush. So his gold was actually in writing. He actually ended up doing quite well for himself and not by panning for gold. But it was just one more way that we were able to sort of soak up Alaska history and think about what it means to serve others at the same time. And to be sure, this enthusiasm is motivated partly by the excitement of work in a far-off place with this amazing scenery. And of course, it's partly, this enthusiasm is partly motivated by some enticing paychecks and tips. Let's be real here, right? But as I watched these folks being so darn hospitable, I was thinking about what it means to serve, even if the paychecks and the tips aren't so good. For many of this area's service workers, that is the reality. And if you have spent any time in theme parks or hotels or restaurants, you know how challenging that work can be when guests become rude, crude, and ill-mannered. So I mentioned that I had worked in hospitality before. It was while I was a student at UCF. I worked in attractions at what I will forever know as the Disney MGM Studios. I will never call it anything else. So I have plenty of firsthand experience of this reality. When guests see their vacation as an opportunity to act like the whole world should constantly be at their beck and call, it's sure tempting to lash out, to retaliate, to try to teach somebody a lesson. Jesus had something to say about this temptation, and not just in the context of service, but of our common life together. So I want to start reflecting on today's gospel passages with this one from Matthew 5, starting at verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you must not oppose those who want to hurt you. If people slap you on your right cheek, you must turn the left cheek to them as well. When they wish to haul you to court and take your shirt, let them have your coat too. When they force you to go 1 mile, go with them too. Give to those who ask, and don't refuse those who wish to borrow from you. When I listened to this portion of Matthew's account of the Sermon on the Mount, not opposing one who wishes to do you harm and turning the other cheek for a slap, it sounds like a subversive Disney cast member training in one hand. But of course, it's so much more. It's subversive, definitely, but cunning in its submissiveness. For such behavior like going the extra mile is unexpected and disarming. It challenges behavioral norms and offers a different way of looking at the world. And if there ever has been a time when we need a different way of looking at the world, it is now. So when Jesus sends us to serve, what does that look like? Well, to sum up this selection from the Sermon on the Mount, it looks like doing more than is expected. It looks like abandoning the emptiness of an eye for an eye, for such results only in continued bitterness and enmity. To put it simply, from a service industry perspective, it means serving your customers. What a concept. But in America, we seem to have forgotten this basic tenet of human decency. Instead, we take sides, saying, well, this baker shouldn't bake the cake for the same gender wedding couple, or this restaurant shouldn't serve the president's press secretary. We hide behind our pretenses of religion and politics, when the truth is closer to the fact that we simply don't like someone. Now, to be clear, this is not a matter of whether you agree with someone's choices. It's a matter of treating someone the way you want to be treated, whether you like them or not. It's the golden rule. It's also a matter of doing your job. Maybe you are proud of your sign that says, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." But how you observe that right can speak volumes. After all, what's a more convincing sign of the gospel of Jesus? Which one looks more like the fruits of the Spirit? My grandma always said that you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. When Jesus sends us to serve, we do so in his name. At the end of the day, what do you suppose is more pleasing to him? Our self-righteousness or our kindness? But we continue to struggle with this. We love to think of ourselves as closer to God than our neighbor. We even comfort ourselves with this opinion and elevate it over Jesus' clear command to serve one another with love. If we can take real comfort in anything, it's that we are not the only ones who struggle with this, as we now turn to Luke and read from there. An argument broke out among the disciples over which one of them should be regarded as the greatest. But Jesus said to them, "The kings of the Gentiles rule over their subjects, and those in authority over them are called friends of the people. But that's not the way it will be with you. Instead, the greatest among you must become like a person of lower status, and the leader like a servant. So which one is greater, the one who is seated at the table or the one who serves at the table? Isn't it the one who is seated at the table? But I am among you as one who serves." First, I want to note the context of this discussion. It takes place at the very table where Jesus has just shared the Last Supper with his disciples, a celebration we remembered in this space last week. They do not know exactly what is about to happen, but Jesus has just revealed that one of them will betray him. And instead of expressing sadness or remorse, the 12 begin to argue over who would do such a thing. And that argument leads to even more arguing about which one of them is the best follower of Jesus. They've been taught from birth to think this way, that rank is important, that status is to be sought. Whether they're a fisherman or a tax collector or something else, they are not to be satisfied with their station. But Jesus came to initiate a new economy centered at the table. He served them at the table, introducing them to a new reason to share the bread and the cup, to remember him, and to remember that new economy. And this new way that Jesus instituted started with his own humility. He acknowledged that societal norms dictated that one at the table is greater than the one who serves. But then he shocked them with this revelation that he himself came not to be seated, but to serve those who were. And in this way, Jesus showed the disciples that in order to complete their training and graduate to apostleship, they had to start with humility, submissiveness, and service. Only then, from this posture of servitude and sacrifice, could they truly emulate and communicate the very nature of God's own reduction of self, who assumed the form and nature of humanity in the person of Jesus Christ, and who would soon suffer a humiliating death on a cross for the sake of that humanity. Now, in the second service today, we're also going to read from 1 Samuel. In the 1 Samuel passage, we hear a story of Samuel called on by the warriors of Israel to pray to God to help them defeat the Philistines. Samuel prays while offering a sacrifice, and the Lord responded by thundering a great blast among the Philistines, scattering and confusing them. Israel thus wins the day, and Samuel erects a memorial to God called an Ebenezer, literally a stone of help, to mark the place where God intervened. Robert Robinson, a British Baptist pastor from centuries past, recalled this word Ebenezer, as you may see fit, in a verse of his hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." And this verse says, "Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He, to rescue me from danger, interposed his precious blood." Friends, we are no longer strangers wandering from the fold. We are friends, mutually rescued from danger by the blood of Christ. And Christ calls us to extend that invitation of friendship to a broken world in many ways. In serving our neighbors with humility and grace, we draw them closer to the gospel of Jesus Christ and authentically witness to the difference that he makes in our lives. We are at once disciples learning to serve better and apostles sent to serve as best as we can. Let us assume this posture of submission and service as Jesus did, that we might bring glory and honor to him. In his name, amen.